This episode is brought to you by Audible. Enjoy 30 days free of Audible Premium Plus by going to ontopofpr.com/audible.
Welcome to On Top of PR with Jason Mudd, presented by Review Maxer.
Hello and welcome to On Top of PR. I'm your host, Jason Mudd with Axia Public Relations. Today, I'm joined by Mark Riggs, the CEO and lead strategist of Pemberton, a management consultancy focused on guiding marketing and communications agencies towards organic growth. With more than 20 years of experience in the agency sector, he has worked with notable firms. Throughout his career, Mark has developed award-winning consumer programs for major brands, including Allstate, Honda, Ford, and Coca-Cola. Mark is a friend, a smart friend at that, and we're certainly going to enjoy that. You'll certainly enjoy the conversation we're going to have today. Mark, I want to welcome you to On Top of PR.
Thanks for having me, Jason. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah. So I know you normally work as a consultant to PR firms and advertising agencies to help them improve their services to brands and clients. And today we're kind of flipping the script a little bit and sharing some of your advice that you get paid the big bucks for sharing with agencies. And sharing them with clients, so to kind of educate and inform clients on a little bit of the inside or secrets of what they're missing out on with having the best agency relationship and partnership. And that's the things that you help agencies do. And we're taking this opportunity to kind of share with brands what things they could be doing to allow their agencies to be an even better partner. Does that sound like a good summary of what we're going to cover today?
Yeah, it sounds like we discussed. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, great. So, Mark, I know you've got a list of things that you could talk about. Overall, kind of, we're recording this on February 21, 2025, and I know the content you're going to share is going to be applicable for years to come for our audience who are listening on demand. But, kind of where we are right now, where you are in your career, kind of what's the one kind of exclamation point or the most important thing our audience of brands and corporations who are buyers of PR firm services or doing PR in-house, what's one thing they need to know about the current marketplace and or how to, best leverage their agency resources?
That's a great question. And I think the answer is timeless. So it'd be good for your on-demand listeners as well. Someone said to me a long time ago, this is not an original quote, but unexpressed expectations are planned resentments. And I think lots of times brands, companies are looking for agency support, and they come assuming that agency is like every other agency maybe they worked with in the past, or they saw a television show about an agency and they think that's what it's like, right? And so to me, what's going to be indicative of success with that agency partner is the way you start with that agency partner. So being very clear about what your expectations are of them, what you want the outcomes to be, how you want the story to end. I know we'll talk a little bit about that, but from an agency perspective, when you're trying to manage around people's assumptions, or you're assuming every other PR agency operates like every other PR agency, it's a dangerous game because you're going to end up disappointed. So as a former account guy, I can tell you when my phone has rang many times and I saw that client calling, I was like, I just really don't want to talk to them again because it gets frustrating because we didn't really have clarity around what we were trying to achieve together and what my skill set would be in terms of trying to achieve those objectives for them, right? So the big thing is from the very beginning, express your very candid expectations of them, even if it's the way you work. I had a client one time after, I worked for one agency and it was, kind of a 24-hour a day agency job. They took it very serious. I leave there, go to another agency and start managing a big brand. And I thought, account people are supposed to be on all the time. Ideas at 8:00 at night. And, hey, can you hop on at 10? That type of thing, right? And then finally, one of my clients called me and I thought things were just going really, really well, Jason. And she called me up and said, you have to stop calling my people after 5:00. I was like, what? what universe are you from? And she said, no. She says, the majority of my internal team here at this brand are parents. And at 5:00, I want them to go home and be mom and dad.
Right.
Unexpressed expectation. No one ever told me that. Right. So I'm pounding people with emails and calls and all this kind of stuff, thinking, because that's the way I was raised in account management. So you have to express your expectations, because if you don't, you can't manage those expectations. How many times have you as an agency leader, or me, having told someone or having heard it as we were coming along in our careers, you got to manage the client's expectations.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, did you set any expectations?
Yeah.
Right. And so that the final point of that, to kind of wrap that answer up, which is kind of a long one, I apologize, but it also goes back to scopes of work. What an agency, what a client or a brand needs to realize is that agency is very excited to have your piece of business, right? They want to get something signed and they want to just jump right in and they want to start billing, right? And what we really don't stop and do is say, hey, I specifically need these things. And the ambiguity of scopes of work lead to resentments, because we use words like ongoing media relations or as needed brainstorming. Well, ongoing's all the time. Mm-hmm. So now with the agency, they have set an expectation with a client that I'm going to be on all the time. And then when you're not, and you call them up and say, hey, you're asking too much of that thing, it's a problem, because you set the expectation at the beginning with that client that you were going to do ongoing media relations, right? Well, you told me ongoing, and ongoing's all the time, right? Not that you were going to pitch 15 outlets a month strategically, right? So to me, the big thing is expressing expectations of what you're looking for, the business impact you want this to have, what you want the outcomes to be, what the problem is you're trying to solve, and how we should work together. Because the last time I looked, I don't know about you, but I saw a number just last week. There's over 57,000 PR firms in this country.
That's incredible. I thought it was closer to like 3,000 at the most.
Okay, well, I could be misinformed, but this was the information I read. Regardless, there's a lot, right? And this notion that we're all the same, we all operate the same, is a misnomer. And I think clients need to realize that, especially, if you're moving on from one agency to a new agency, mm-hmm. Apply those key learnings and express your expectations so we're all on the same page.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. My job at the agency is to talk to potential clients who contact us, and I'm kind of, just as much as they're screening and vetting us, I'm screening and vetting them too, and I'm listening careful to their word choices and how they describe their existing relationship. And, I'm a little bit known for saying, hey, why don't you go back to your current agency and have this conversation with them instead of me? And if you guys can't work it out or it doesn't get better, come back to me. But what you're describing, I think, is kind of like you're saying, Mark, uncommunicated expectations or just a little bit of change in alignment. And, I want to circle back to what you said earlier. You're working at an agency and the client's telling you, hey, pull it back a little bit, right. But for every client that wants it pulled back a little bit, there's another client that wants it turned up another notch or two, right?
That's right.
And so, I personally have had, CEOs, typically the owner, entrepreneur behind the brand, call me after hours and say, hey, what are we doing with our PR program? I don't have time, during the day to think about it or ask my marketing people. So I just decided to call you on a Friday night at 7:00 to, have you do a rundown and a briefing. And I'm like, well, that's nice. I'm out to dinner. I answered this because I thought there might be something urgent, but, I guarantee there's something in your email and we can circle back on Monday or next week during business hours. And then they proceed to tell me how busy they are during business hours. And I just, that wasn't part of our, expectations, scope of work, or whatever it might be. So, happy to brief you, but can't do it right now, And, but then I've had other clients, not exactly what you described, but just one of those things like, hey, slow down a little bit, like a little less intense for us.
Yeah. Well, I think,
so those are really good conversations to have. And I think clients that have the client that's asking them to scale back or scale back the intensity, or, usually surprised but happy about it. And then the ones who are like, I expect you to be on call 24/7, 365, including Christmas, is a little extreme.
Yeah, because again, we all use these words like retainer. What does that really mean? Most agencies throw that word around. They don't know what it means. The other thing I think is really, really important for clients and potential clients to understand about PR agencies is we're in business too.
Right.
We're actually trying to make money. We're not here for our health. We're not here on scholarship. Right. And the way it was put to me a long time ago is, whether you are a value-based agency or you bill by the hour, it really doesn't matter. In this business, I have two things. I have people and I have time. If you don't pay me for the time, I can't employ the people to do the work or vice versa. Right. So if you asked me to do, I'm totally making this up, Jason, but we're going to develop, 5 pieces of content per month. Okay. Well, in the beginning, based on what you're paying me, I staffed against a need to bill number, right, to ensure some reasonable profitability, agency standard industry profitability. I staffed it to do 5 things. Okay.
Right.
But when you're constantly asking me to do 10 of those things, basically what's happening now is I've got another client paying for your time. Because now I'm eating into somebody else's time that they've paid for. Right. Yeah. And if I've promised you 5 things and you ask me for 6, I'm willing to exude partnership. Right. I'll do the 6th one. And I know that's going to come back to me in spades, hopefully. But if you're constantly asking me for 10 things when I said I was going to do 5,
right,
that's when we have to have a conversation. And so when these clients come to agencies and say, hey, I'm going to pay you X amount of dollars per month or year to do X, Y, and Z, and then they keep asking for things above and beyond that, then you're asking them to give away free work. And the problem with what we do on the agency side lots of times is it's very intangible, right? It's results and ideas and strategy. And, it's not you and I walking out of Dick's with a sporting goods with a tennis racket in our hand. It's not a tangible product, right? So clients need to understand we're in business too. And so, I just think that's really, really important. They need to consider that we have to pay for people. We have to pay for overhead. We have to pay for resources. We have to pay for tools, all the things to perform and do well to help deliver what you need delivered. So that's why in the very beginning is really important to express the expectations. And quite honestly, listen to the agency's expectations of you. I think if we're going to be in partnership, it's totally fair for the agency to have expectations of the client.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm only as good as the information I have. Right.
Yeah. I feel like sometimes the clients don't really hear that. You might share it to them, but they don't really hear it because they're thinking of themselves as the buyer and almost like the agency's subordinate. And I feel like that's starting the relationship off to a bad start. Our position is we're peers, we're equals, we're adding equal value to each other's organizations. We're trusted advisors, trusted experts. And in turn, you're hiring us for our expertise. We're providing our services to help you grow your business. We often think that we're probably never going to know as much about their business and their company as they do. However, when the client turnover happens, we typically, are the ones educating them about the company, which is fine. Point. That's part of the value we bring. Right. But yeah, I think that's important. The other thing, you mentioned earlier, like if you hire an agency to do 5 things, I'm going to yes and you and say, when the scope says those 5 things are 5 things related to media relations, and you've got a team of experts doing media relations, because people think of media relations when they think of PR. But then you're like, well, you know what? Since you said that one of the 5 things isn't newsworthy, how about you write a blog post for us about that, or you write a case study? Well, suddenly you're asking somebody who's a media relations expert to do something outside of their expertise or their specialization. And for the agency, that represents a problem, because I've hired Mark to do 5 media pitches during a certain period of time. Now Mark's saying, well, let's only do 2 media pitches and let's trade in those other 3 things for a series or 1 blog post, case study, some social media. Well, now as the agency, they've got the challenge of finding people who have that specialization to jump on a client for just a quarter or 6 months or a year, whatever it might be, but for a one-time deliverable, and then they're out again, right? And so that's part of the challenge, I think, too, is, clients, well, why don't you just write some web copy for us, right? And it's like, well, David is great at media relations. He's a pretty good writer, but he's not the guy to be writing, converting landing pages on your website.
Right.
And then the other thing I think is important too is, I ask clients, like if a company comes to us and they're like, well, we want you to, I had this happen last week, Mark, I can't make this up. Client came to us and said, hey, I know you offered this for 2 of our executives, but we want it for 3. And we want it to be the same price as the package was originally for 2. And we want to be able to walk away at any time, not with the cancellation notice that you put in the agreement. And so I'm like, okay, let me repeat back to you what you're asking, right? And I said, you're asking us to reduce the price by 40%, give it to you on a shorter timeline, and then give you, the same scope of work. And they're like, yeah, that seems reasonable to us. And I said, do you do that in your own business? Do you let customers
do you work for
come,
free? Right.
Customers come, 1, and tell you what they're going to pay you, and negotiate, and 2, if you're allowing that, you really need our help, and so that to me is a real life conversation I just had. And so, my favorite part of that was kind of repeating it back to them to see how they reacted. Right. And the most junior person, said, yeah, that's what we're asking. And you could see the senior people being like, yeah, okay. Yeah. He's got a good point here. So, I think, like you said, your agency is a business. They're not a, low cost supplier or vendor. And the more intellectual capital they have, the more valuable their insights and specialization experience are, and they are to you, the harder it is for them to do things like that for free.
Yeah. Well, listen, in that situation, and I've had that happen to me before. I worked on a client piece of business for 10 years. Okay. About year 5, we wanted to change pricing. We needed to increase pricing. And the question was, do you love this team? Is this team's done great work? That's why you've been with us for 5 years. Right. Yeah, I love this team. I want them all to stay. Okay. Well, because they've done great work for you, they've all gotten raises and promotions. Mm-hmm. So they're more expensive now. So I can trade them out for junior staff. Right. And so what I basically end up doing is trying to give people real world examples. Mm-hmm. Because what I think a lot of agency people forget is that our clients are consumers as well, right? They understand the consumer paradigm. And so I say to a client, if I went into Target with $100, can I expect to walk out of Target with $300 worth of goods?
Yeah.
And they'll say no. I said, well, why are you expecting that of me?
Right. Right.
I'm running a business. I've priced everything properly based on the cost relative to our experience, relative to the outputs that you need, all those things, so why are you asking me to work for free? Do you work for free?
Right.
Right. And that's kind of, it goes back to our conversation before we started recording, is people in our industry being comfortable having that business conversation. And saying, listen, I'm more than glad to do all that work for you. I'll get you an estimate.
Right. Well, and let's go back to that conversation we were having earlier where we were talking about, candidly kind of the lack of, MBAs, maybe even the lack of attorneys that decide to go into the practice of PR, corporate communications, content, if you will. Because obviously PR has evolved to become first of all, PR has always been more than media coverage. And certainly with the tools we have at our digital display, PR people are becoming more and more strategic communicators using digital tools to get that done on behalf of their employer, clients, brands, et cetera. But to that end, I think I know for a fact, because we're friends and we've met at industry events and I've heard you speak, you're advising agencies to, educate their people on business, seek out people who have the credentials and understand how business works, because the more we understand about business, the better advisors we can be to our employers and clients, et cetera. But I'm kind of flipping this around and saying, but, clients brands should be thinking the same thing about their people. And oftentimes their people do have MBAs, and oftentimes the employer pays for it. But they should also, every agency can raise their hand and said, I've had a conversation with someone who asked me what kind of ROI are they going to get from their investment in our PR services, but yet they couldn't tell me what their current sales are, what their costs are, and what their margins are. And so I'm trying to educate somebody on the other line who is an expert about their company and their business, but just educating them about business and saying, I can't tell you what your ROI is going to be because, one, that's really hard to do because we don't know what's going to happen in the marketplace. But two, if you can't tell me your margins and your cost of doing business, then I can't predict to you your ROI. I can predict maybe your return on value. I might be able to predict how that might impact sales. But just because sales went up doesn't mean that you got an ROI, because technically an ROI is a return on the profits or the total investment, right? What goes in the shareholders' pockets afterwards. And that conversation sometimes candidly kind of will, pardon my term, but piss some people off because, I've now kind of put them on the spot and they've been talking about ROI for years and realize, one, they don't know what ROI means. And two, they're asking me to answer a question that they can't supplement me with the content they need. Then they might go back, and I'm talking a little bit about this, but they may go back to, it might be a private company and no one's giving out that kind of information, right? And so then they realize, oh, I'm not in this position I thought I was within the organization, kind of thing. So what do you think about that, Mark?
Oh, that's a lot to unpack, Jason. One thing I think is, again, I go back to this term, and I'm only as good as the information I have.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
And so,
so not only is the agency, but so are your people that work in your marketing or communications department, right?
Yeah, no doubt. And going back to talking about the client side personnel and their expectations and, what they're asking for in terms of ROI, I'll give you a real life example, even real time. So I'm working with an agency right now, great agency. And they, at Pemberton, we do not do net new business, right? We will help agencies with a new business strategy, but we don't go out and beat the bushes and stuff, right? So, but this particular client had a great opportunity, asked me if I would review the RFP, which they generally don't respond to, but it was just a great opportunity that someone would call them and personally invited them to participate, finite number of agencies, that type of thing. That's another piece of advice for clients. Don't invite 20 agencies. I'm out, for inviting 20 agencies. So anyway, in the RFP document, this particular RFP is in support of a very large entertainment retail type facility. Okay. And one of the things they want to do is increase foot traffic. That's one of their goals.
Right.
Increase.
Right. But do they even know what it is right now, right?
Boom. And so one of the discovery questions, I said, well, listen, I think you need to ask them, do they track traffic?
Right.
Are they tracking people who walk through the doors or walk onto the property? And they asked that in discovery. And the client comes back and says no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, then how in the hell am I supposed to know? You know what I mean? I mean, there's other ways to correlate. I get it, sales and all this kind of stuff. But
I've literally been asked, hey, Jason, how has your efforts increased our foot traffic? And I said, well, what is your foot traffic right now? Or, what is it? What is it currently? And they're like, oh, we don't know. I'm like, well, how am I supposed to tell you how much we've increased your foot traffic if you don't even know what your foot traffic is, right? So I think it's just these moments where they don't really understand that data is required to measure.
Now, my counsel to you would be to say, hey, well, we should go and measure that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's usually
let's go get a 1 month sample size. Yeah. And we can, amortize that across the year and make some assessments, right? Yeah. And so you've just upsold some services there, Jason. You're welcome. But
or my other favorite, Mark, is hey, can you send a report about impact or that we've had, and you kind of say to the client, this is the first time you've responded or had any interest in talking about measurement. even though we've tried to have those conversations, and you've either been too busy or I don't have that information. And now, because somebody asked you, you're like, hey, can you send over something later today that we can show, measure our progress? And we're like, oof, that it doesn't exist.
Yeah. I mean, what's funny is I used to work for an agency, and we follow this very strategic process. And one of the first things we always talked about was measurement. Because an inordinate amount of agencies don't talk about measurement, don't talk about impact on the beginning. And our feeling was, if we stand up and we're accountable and we express that we're accountable, we're going to have more opportunities. And I think that turned out to be true. So my point in that is I would share with potential clients or brands who are seeking agency support or have agencies, is that if you have an agency who's not willing to talk about measurement, not willing to talk about analytics, not willing to talk, that's the problem. Right. And so you want someone asking you about these things, right? If I'm trying to sell more of X, well, I want to be able to make a reasonable correlation that my outputs had an impact on those business outcomes. Right. And so there are a multitude of ways of doing that, but we got to be able to have the conversation, And so, I was going to make another point when you were talking about the my reaction, and I said there was a lot to unpack there. One of the things I always find interesting too is we on the agency side generally take the subservient attitude. And you talked a little bit about this earlier. We take the subservient attitude towards our clients. Like they're in charge of us, or they're our boss, and they are not. They don't sign my checks, right? They're a client. We're supposed to be collaborators, and you're generally coming to me because I have a level of expertise where you think I can move the needle for your business, right? And so let's have that conversation. Let's talk about the baseline. And if there is no baseline, let's create one. We only have to do it one time, because if we create one baseline and then we can measure and we go over and over and over that. But, those same clients will come back and just say, I just fired my other firm. I need more impressions. I live this. So I worked on a program where the program the year before had 6 billion impressions. Okay. And so the goal was to increase impressions.
Right.
And I said, by one?
Yeah.
Like, what's increase? Like, what does that mean? Like, right. And, oh, by the way, you only do business in North America. Why do I need to create 6 billion impressions? Right. Right. Yeah. Or, I mean,
aren't they talking about repetitions ultimately?
Yeah. And in most agencies, the old school, we would put a multiple on that, and it was totally, So let's talk about real business analytics. Yeah. So quite honestly, you can hold me accountable. And you can get a return on those dollars that you spent, because to me, I want to be able to make a reasonable correlation between my communication outputs and your business outcomes. Right. And that's a win. And that's really what it boils down to. And so if you're holding that information back from me, or like you said, I come to realize I don't have the power to even give you that information. Right. We're having the wrong conversation, and I'm talking to the wrong person.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're listening to On Top of PR with your host, Jason Mudd. Jason is a trusted advisor to some of America's most admired and fastest growing brands. He is the managing partner at Axia Public Relations, a PR agency that guides news, social, and web strategies for national companies. And now, back to the show.
Yeah. So, do you have any tips for clients, brands, manager, directors of marketing when they're in these situations? What would you do if you were them? How would you go about approaching leadership or going about getting access to data? Because I know as the agency, we've been told, well, we have that information. We could share it with you, but we think it's proprietary, or, our CIO or our sales guy or somebody isn't comfortable giving that out. Then it's like, okay, well, our hands are tied then. So what would you do, thinking of the brand manager, if you will, in trying to manage these expectations or these limitations internally?
This is a big umbrella response. And so I know not every organization operates the same, Jason. But to me, I want to know, are these working or non-working dollars?
Working or non-working dollars?
Dollars, okay. Right? Okay. And then you hear a lot of that in advertising, right? So are these working or non-working dollars? And if someone knows that terminology, or if they don't know that terminology, they're going to say, well, they're working dollars. Yeah. Okay, great. Well, we're going to spend money with this agency, and I'm expecting a return.
Right.
A business return. Yeah. Right.
And so are you, colleague or boss, or
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah. So let's give them what they need. We're all end to end up. I mean, what do they think that you're going to do with it?
Right.
You go and sell on the black market, or, who cares? Right.
Right.
So if there's going to be partnership, again, this word gets thrown around so much.
Right.
Are you exuding partnership? You want the agency to act like a partner.
Yeah.
But what are you doing to exude partnership? Right. Mm-hmm. And that kind of goes into this whole thing of, I've heard so many times I'll hear a client say, well, we're looking for your agency to invest.
Right.
I'm not an investor.
Right.
I'm not an investor. When I hear you want me to invest, you want me to work for free.
Right.
Is what you're asking me to do.
Is, right. Yeah.
That's the code word. Yeah. If I invest in something, I expect a dividend. Mm-hmm. So sure, I'll invest. You're going to give me a percentage of the business?
Right.
Am I going to get some of the revenue on the back end? 100%. I'm here. We can talk about investment. Right. And so that again goes back to agencies need to be able to speak the language of business, commerce. Right. And so
I've just made a note, right? ROI and partner are terms that feel like sometimes clients, agency people don't really know what those mean, but they throw it around loosely, right? And one example I like to share is like, hey, I might be a shareholder in Apple, but they're not going to call me on a Friday afternoon and go, hey, we're short staffed. Could you come into the store and work a couple hours for us because you're a shareholder? Right. Yeah. They're not going to do that. And so, that's kind of how I feel about, with business owners, when I'm talking to fellow business owners, it's like, you've got to pay yourself a salary, right? The return on investment for running an agency or running a business or whatever, right? That's for the risk you take and the capital you put into it, not for the hours you put into it.
Yeah. Do you send me a W-2 or a 1099? Right. Right.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. You were going to say something before I interrupted, Mark.
Okay. I'm sure it was brilliant, but I don't remember what it is now.
Right.
Well, no, I do, Jason. I'm sorry. What I was going to say is going back to those client conversations is, and I had a former client of mine say this. It was in a conversation, and I talk about this lots of times when I speak, and I won't put him on the spot, but he did me a big favor. I was young in my career. And he asked me, he goes, why is it that agencies are so aggressive and creative in trying to win my business? And then you win my business and it's like you entrench into this fear and trepidation. Like you stop bringing the ideas, right? Mm-hmm. And so I gave him a reason, which I was totally made up and, just off the cuff. And he goes, well, listen, here's the deal. I need you to keep bringing it, right? And so he was expressing this expectation. And he said, listen, as long as you bring me ideas that are on strategy, on brand, and you can articulate some reasonable business benefit, I will always listen.
Yeah.
I may not always buy, but I'll always listen, and batting 300 will get you in the Hall of Fame. And we grew that piece of business into a multi-million-dollar piece of business. He did not buy all the time.
Right.
But we kept bringing him ideas, and it was under the auspice of, well, it's my job to bring you ideas. So I think when clients hire an agency, they need to be explicit. It's not about this moment in time.
Yeah,
it is. Maybe we're launching a new product. There's a big anniversary coming up, whatever the occasion may be. But I want you to keep bringing it. That is my expectation.
Yeah. Because
when you don't, I have to find another agency. And then I have to go to procurement. I have to issue an RFP, and I got to get all these entries. And hell, it's a year from now before I'm hiring. I want this to work.
Right.
So I've made the decision to go with your agency. Keep bringing it. Don't have the expectation I'm going to buy every time.
Yeah.
But keep bringing it.
I think that's really good because I've seen firsthand where clients will tell you one quarter, hey, I don't want any ideas. I'm busy, or whatever. And then the next quarter, they're like, hey, I haven't got any ideas from you guys. I want more ideas. And it's like, well, or what you just said, we give them ideas. They don't express interest or give feedback on any of them or we send them, We follow up, nothing, right? Crickets. And then, then the account manager or the team just says, oh, they don't want anything else, like whatever. And then they come back and say, well, you never, at first you gave us ideas, but then you stopped, right? And so I am constantly reminding my team, hey, new quarter, we've got to send them new ideas. Well, they don't seem really interested in our ideas. Well, we're still going to make time to share some ideas with them. And I've started putting it in the scope of work, Mark.
Thank you. I was about to say, put it in the scope of work.
So every quarter we commit to bringing them new ideas. And when they say, no, I don't want to do that, or I'm not available, or skip the meeting, we just say, okay, that's fine. It's in your scope of work. Would you please confirm that you're okay with us not doing it this quarter or whatever? But, meanwhile, I'm saying, okay, well, let's at least record a Loom video with the best idea we have, tease it for 30 seconds to 2 minutes, mark it so we know if they watched it or not. And then we can at least say we did something. But, at the end of the day, I know from, having done this for 20 something years, research shows the one thing clients can't do internally is come up with ideas the way agencies can. And some of that is culture, right? Some of that is just understanding the process of building innovation within the organization, but also the objectivity that an agency brings, and having seen, hundreds of other campaigns, hundreds or dozens of other companies and how they're operating. And as you know, Mark, often an agency has solved something already for another company that's now getting around to your industry or your company that they can say, yeah, we've done this before. Here's the 5 things we did.
So you just reminded me. So years ago, and you must have heard some guy from Pemberton talking about putting that into the scope of work. Years ago, there was a white paper that came out.
Okay.
And I can't remember the gentleman's name who wrote the white paper, but I use it. I still read it all the time. It's called The 5 Cardinal Sins of Client Relationships.
Okay.
And I don't mean to slight the gentleman. I just can't remember his name off the top of my head, but I'll give him credit for his thinking. And one of the things he talks about in the 5 Cardinal Sins is, not discussing how we should work together. And we talked a little bit about it at the beginning, but You just reminded me this idea of if I'm a client, I'm a brand, I'm a company, and I'm going to hire my PR agency. What we often hear is, hey, here's Jason. He's the assistant brand manager. He's going to manage you guys.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
Right. We're going to work together. Right. But I would encourage those companies to say, hey, let me share with you Jason's background. So here's what you can expect from Jason and what he's going to be expecting of you.
Right.
Because, that same client that asked me the question about why don't you keep bringing it, he goes, you do realize most of the people in my marketing department are just, managers.
Mm-hmm.
He said their jobs are to keep people, on budget, on time, all the whole thing. That's their jobs. Right. I'm coming to you for the creativity. I'm coming to you for the results. Right. Mm-hmm. So if Jason Mudd is going to be my, managing my account, or you're going to be the client and we're going to be working together, hey, what role are you going to play in this, Jason? Mm-hmm. Are you going to be coming up with ideas, or is that you expect me to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, it goes back to when we've talked about this before, is one of those questions, do you want me to be a counselor or do you want me to be an order taker? Mm-hmm. I'm fine with either.
Yeah.
I just want clarity of mission.
Yeah.
So I don't want you to come to me 6 months from now when you said, Jason's going to come up with all the ideas. We just need you to execute. Mm-hmm. And then you come to me and say, where's the ideas? Well,
right.
You said Jason was going to come up with all the ideas, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think lots of times they want to know, it drives me nuts when a client says, hey, I want you to bring the team to the pitch that's going to work on the business.
Right.
Why? I'll bring the lead because they're going to be consistent, but
right.
People coming, that type of thing. So, but if you had that expectation of me, I would like to know more about you and what role you're going to play in this and how we're going to collaborate, because we're meant to be partners, right? Yeah, and so partners, there's equal weight. We're equally yoked, right? Yeah. And so, if you're going to hire an agency, make sure that you're communicating to them, to the agency, what role you're playing in all of this. Mm-hmm. So there's no assumptions left to the imagination of whether I'm supposed to be bringing ideas, I'm not supposed to be bringing ideas, or you just want X, Y, and Z because that's what Bob over here wanted before. right?
Yeah.
So
I've never thought about about this, but you've inspired it, which is, one of the complaints I hear from companies that are coming to our agency is the last agency I hired, I met the leadership, and then once I signed on the dotted line, they disappeared. I got these junior people. And the way I'm turning this around, because I've never thought about this way, is yes, but that happens to us too, right? The chief marketing officer meets us, makes a decision, hires us, and then we almost never have access to them again. And we're working with somebody else who was either barely involved or who just thrown in like, oh, hey, we just hired, Axia, and, this is our marketing manager. She's got a little bit of experience working with PR firms. She's going to take it from here. And then you go in that situation where the marketing manager doesn't have access to data, doesn't have access to approved ideas or movements. And I know that frustrates a lot of agencies too, where you've got a big idea, but the person that you're pitching it to is like, oh, I can't take that to management, or I'm not comfortable with the idea period of taking it to management. So, but then if you can get management, at a conference or at dinner or something like that, and you run the idea by them, they're like, that's amazing. Like, yes, let's do this right away. Right. And you're thinking to myself, oh, I've been trying for 6 months, to get this in front of you. So, yeah.
Yeah. Or the other thing too, is when they put that manager on the business to manage the agency. Yeah. And have you ever asked that manager what they think PR is?
Oof. Yeah.
Oof. Yeah. They think it's press release.
Right. Of
right.
Course it is.
Oftentimes it's press release. And I've had this conversation and once I got to know someone better, I wasn't as bold when I was younger. And I get that, I was scared to break stuff, right. But you get to know a client pretty well and we start having this conversation, and to them it's press releases, throwing a party.
Parties, press releases, and tea time at the golf course, right?
Being a publicist, whatever, right? And no disrespect to our publicist friend, but being a celebrity publicist is not the same as being a PR practitioner.
Absolutely, 100%.
And we could split that a million different ways. But when I posed to this person, I was like, and you've probably heard the same question. It's not anything super innovative, but I asked him, I said, what has solved every problem humanity has ever had?
Good communication.
Good communication. Yeah. Communications.
And you're hiring professional communicators.
And you're hiring us. Exactly right. Yeah. So, let us help you, but let's talk about where you end and I begin.
Yeah.
So there's no assumptions, because again, I'm big on those unexpressed expectations or planned resentments. It happens to us all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mark, this has been great. I just checked. We have run out of time. And so I think we could talk forever.
Okay.
But I'm really glad we did this. Real quick, if people want to get in touch with you, I'm guessing LinkedIn's the best way to initially reach out.
They can find me on LinkedIn, J. Mark Riggs on LinkedIn. They can find Pemberton on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. They can visit our website, pembertonworldwide.com. Or they can, on the website, they can find an email and phone number.
Okay, excellent. Yeah. All right, Mark. Well, I appreciate you being here, sharing your smarts today. I took a lot of notes myself. I'm sure that our audience has done so as well. And if you can figure out the person to give that attribution to that we mentioned earlier, we will include that and other things on our website, on our episode notes. If people just want to go to On Top of PR, we'll have that in there as well for everybody to see. And links to your website and how to find you on social media too. So, Mark, awesome. If you had 10 seconds for a closing thought, what would that be?
If you're going to use the word partnership, mean it.
Okay. Yeah,
right. Collaboration is key. If you're looking to hire an extension of your staff just to do tactics, go hire someone to do that.
Yeah.
Go hire someone internally to do that. Don't. Yeah.
That's a good point. All right, Mark, we appreciate you being here. And we also appreciate our audience for tuning in. This has been another episode of On Top of PR, where we're trying to help you stay on top of PR. Many thanks to Mark for his expertise and insights today. And if there's ever anything we can do for you, just let us know in the comments. And certainly if you'd like to hear any additional topics covered on this episode, we'll be happy to do that too. So with that, I wish you well. Be well. Have a good day. Thanks for tuning in.
This has been On Top of PR with Jason Mudd, presented by ReviewMaxer. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and check out past shows at ontopofpr.com.